Hey fellow Force users, what is up? It's Jasmine, the AhsokaTanoFan, and welcome back to another video. So today guys, we are going to be breaking down episodes 7 to 9, and this is where shit starts to get real, for lack of a better word. I honestly feel like these 3 episodes are what cemented Andor as potentially being one of the best TV shows we've seen, especially for Star Wars. That being said, we still do have the final 3 episodes to drop of the season, or of the series I should say, so time will tell. But yeah, these episodes were truly incredible, especially 8 and 9, but I think that all these episodes together were really well done. So without further ado guys, let's blast our way into episode 7 and then we'll break down the episodes. So episode 7 takes place 1 year later yet again. It does seem as though they're doing a time jump every 3 episodes, which I think is meant to bring us closer and closer to the events of Rogue One. We start off on Yavin and we see that Cassian, Bix, and Will seem to be adjusting to somewhat of a new life. Will seems as though he works for the rebellion now, so I guess things worked out with Saw after all. I wasn't so sure for a minute because Saw is a little bit cray-cray, I'm not gonna lie. We also see some more of Cassian and Bix, and it looks almost as though they've been out of the field for a little bit. They live in a nice quiet area, they've got a nice little house. Overall, a very peaceful life from the looks of it. But of course, we know that this can't last forever, right? Later on in the episode, Cassian and Bix visit this lady who appears to be some sort of healer / psychic. I wasn't even sure if she was maybe force sensitive because of her ability to heal Cassian's wound. The highlight from this scene was the fact that the lady saw something about Cassian. She doesn't say exactly what it was. This is really chilling because obviously we know Cassian's fate from Rogue One. We do know that he does in fact die by the end of that film. So is this what the lady was potentially seeing? I just found overall that was a lot of good foreshadowing there and just shows that Cassian is such an important character and such an important part of the rebellion overall. It is because of him and Jyn Erso that the rebellion is able to get their hands on the top secret plans regarding the Death Star, and this will lead to the eventual destruction of the Death Star, which is pretty much the beginning of the end for the Empire. So back to earlier on in the episode, we find out that the rebellion has grown quite a bit and they are now no longer operating in separate factions and whatnot. They seem to have grown into a real army, a real force to be reckoned with, no pun intended. And with that comes more rules as well, which Cassian doesn't seem too fond of. We do see in one of the later episodes, Cassian does repeatedly say that he wants to do what he wants to do and not follow anybody else's rules or something along those lines. And it seems as though Will is kind of a, well, rebel against this, and he kind of does his own thing to a certain degree. We learn that he also wants to take out Dedra, and he is aware of her presence on Gorman. It would seem as though Dedra killed Will's father, and one would think this is a big motivation for wanting to kill her. But Will also insists that this is not simply a revenge mission. He wants to take her out because of the role she plays in the Empire. We see in this episode that Operation Gorman is underway. Dedra is notified of this by her superior. And I found that during this scene, Dedra looked a bit conflicted. You could tell from the beginning that she didn't want Gorman. You're pretty much made to believe during the scene that Dedra is thinking about all the things that could go wrong. But what you're not certain of is whether or not she's thinking of the innocent lives that could be affected or lost, or whether or not she's thinking about what this will do potentially to her reputation if things go wrong, kind of like they did on Ferrix. We see her talk to Cyril as well. Cyril is starting to get suspicious now. He's hearing of these different attacks that are taking place and he's suspecting the Empire's involvement with them. We see Dedra and Cyril speak, and Dedra even kisses him, and she also tells him to be ready to leave and return to the apartment, but she doesn't tell him exactly what's going on. And at this point in time, it does lead me to wonder whether or not she is trying to save him for what's going to come, or if she could be setting him up. You'll recall in my last video, this was also a thought I had early on. Is it possible that Dedra could set him up? Because we do know that she cares for him, but perhaps is her love for the Empire more than her love for Cyril? We of course find out that this wasn't the case, but this was just my thought at the time. She also says that great things are waiting for them and that this will all be over soon. And usually when characters talk like this, you have a feeling that either one of them or both of them will not make it out alive. So my thoughts at this moment in time was that Dedra might be the one to die based on how she was speaking. And we'll of course cover this later in episode 8. During this episode as well, we also see that Mon Mothma's driver is compromised. Just a reminder that there really is becoming an increasing amount of people that you cannot trust during these times. You'd never know who could be a spy and who could be compromised. And in Mon Mothma's case, it does kind of feel as though the walls are closing in around her. She is praised during this episode by another senator for her courage, and he even tells her to take care of herself. And at this point, you really feel as though while other senators may secretly share her views, she is likely the only one that's going to be speaking up about certain things from this point forward, because the Empire is growing more and more powerful. And this brings us into episode 8, guys. Oh my gosh. Holy moly, this episode was incredible. Just incredible. I think possibly even the best Andor episode we've got. As episode 8 starts, we see that the Empire is building a fortress. Up until this point, there have also been reports of various attacks, including an explosion that recently had taken place. We know that the Empire is basically either staging these attacks themselves, or they're baiting Gormans into committing these attacks in order to have justification for what they're about to do. You see, as the fortress is being built, protesters are starting to gather, and the Gorman man, whose name is Rylans, I believe, and his daughter spoke. The daughter was very adamant on speaking up. The father, however, thinks that it is a trap, and he would of course be right to think that way. There's a line that I really like in this episode, and it's in a conversation had between Cassian and the front desk man, in which Cassian says, "I hope things work out for you," to which the man replies, "Rebellions are built on hope." I just thought that was such a deep line, and also a line that I believe we have heard before in Rogue One. The rebellions are built on hope. This man was also introduced a couple episodes back, and he was assisting in checking Cassian into the hotel. So at this point, we have Cassian, we have Cyril, we have Dedra, the rest of the Empire, we have the Gorman rebels, and we have the other rebels that work for Luthen, all focused on Gorman. So right now, Gorman is pretty much the hot spot, you could say. At this point, Cyril appears to only have been tasked with dealing with outside agitators, i.e. rebels, but it doesn't appear that he was actually told about the extraction. And when Cyril finds this out, I actually feel at this moment Cyril is going to change. He is going to become part of this rebellion somehow, once he realizes not only what the Empire is capable of, but the fact that they lied to him. We actually see this kind of come to a head with Dedra. He later in the episode confronts Dedra, and this is the first time we really see Cyril angry at her, and he even gets physical with her. And this was like a tough scene, because on one hand it was tough to watch because as a woman I felt for her, but on the other hand, morally, it's like I agree with Cyril, and I don't know, that whole scene just made me feel so conflicted. But nonetheless, you could just feel the emotion and the tension between these two characters, in which Dedra is forced to tell Cyril the truth. They are there to extract the minerals, more specifically the calcite, and Cyril was not aware of this. He appears pretty much done with her, and he walks out. At this point, I'm feeling that Dedra will be killed, and it will be shown to us that her desire for success within the Empire will not only cost her relationship with Cyril, but her life as well. Of course, we will get to this later because we see what happens in the episode, and I was wrong on this, but this was what I was thinking at the time. As the protest is growing and the Imperial troops are increasing, you could definitely feel the tension in the air, and you really feel like this is going to be an episode where not everybody is going to make it out alive, right? There's even a shot where you see Cassian and Cyril just miss each other in passing as well. I thought that was a pretty interesting shot because it almost shows us that in that moment, when the protests are going on, Cyril and Cassian, they don't look like Empire and Rebellion respectively. They just look like regular people. And that just kind of plays into the theme of you really don't know who is who. And I believe that's actually the episode title, episode 8, Who Are You? And that's a question you can ask to anybody in this episode. You don't really know who anybody is until it comes down to it and you choose a side, and then people are essentially forced to reveal themselves. Them just missing each other in the scene is also big foreshadowing to their fight that would happen later in the episode. This is a side note as well. There's one Imperial man. His helmet kind of looks similar to Kylo Ren. I don't don't know if anybody else noticed that. So as the protests are growing now, one thing that stood out to me was how the reporters were essentially misrepresenting what was actually going on. We, the audience, were pretty much right there with Cassian and with the Gormans. We could see what was going on, and it was a peaceful protest. They even started singing at one point in their native language. But the reporters were painting a very different picture. They were talking about the protesters not being peaceful, the situation being hostile. Cyril even notices this, and that again made me believe that perhaps he's going to change once he sees what the Empire is capable of with slanting information and whatnot. Relating to our own society, it really tells us that you cannot just believe what you hear. Just because you saw something on TV, it doesn't make it true. When we watch the TV, we are shown essentially what they want us to see. And when you have such an oppressive government like the Empire, who has complete and total control over the media, of course they're going to paint the narrative that benefits them, right? And so it was just very, very eye-opening. We also see some of the droids from Rogue One, who are later used in the episode in a pretty horrific way. And you also get the sense that the Empire is waiting for someone to make a move so that they can just start killing everyone. Lo and behold, someone finally cast the first stone, and it is on the side of the protesters. This is when things start to become more tense. Dedra receives orders from Partagaz. I don't know why I have an issue with his name. I have difficulty pronouncing that. And when she receives the orders from Partagaz, she looks disgusted with herself. The officers around her ask her what the orders were, and she hesitates before saying, "Proceed." And at this point, you're questioning, proceed exactly with what? Are they gonna just start extracting, or are they gonna start killing people? You really are curious as to what he said on the other end of that line. But it was bad enough that Dedra looked disgusted with herself. Then you see a sniper aim his rifle at the crowd of protesters, and right away I'm thinking, okay, he's gonna start killing the protesters. But he doesn't. To my surprise, he kills one of the Imperials to make it look like the protesters did so. Now the Empire starts opening fire on all the protesters, and this is when shit gets real. OMG, guys. Dedra is trying to look for Cyril. She doesn't want him to leave the building, but Cyril is already in the crowd at this point, so she's obviously too late with that. The question does arise, though, in trying to look for Cyril / save Cyril, will she die? Because unbeknownst to her, Cassian is waiting for her to step onto the balcony long enough for him to get that shot on her. So you kind of were led to believe that, but of course it didn't happen. At this point, the troopers are just opening fire on these protesters, and the protesters are fighting back because some of them are rebels. They even released the same droids from Rogue One that we saw earlier on in the episode, and this was really chilling. The way that the droid picked up that one girl and threw her was just so brutal and disturbing, and just shows how strong these droids are. When it comes to droids in general, we've seen all sides of them. We've seen the more serious side. We've seen even maybe the more humorous side from the Clone Wars, for example, but this showed just how strong they are and just how deadly they are. And at this point, people aren't even able to surrender, right? They're just opening fire regardless, including on people who are running away. So this was like, this whole sequence was pretty horrific. One of the most horrific things I've seen from Star Wars. And you see Cyril just standing in the center of it all, of all the chaos, looking completely lost. The expression he had on his face told me that he was horrified, shocked, and disgusted at what he was seeing. He was processing the fact that it was the Empire doing this, the same organization he's a part of, but he also looked, believe it or not, guys, like he didn't even care about his own life anymore. I don't know if anybody else got that feeling either, but he just looked so out of it, completely zoned out. And I think that the cinematography during that scene did a really great job in capturing those various emotions. I also was wondering whether or not the front desk guy that Cassian was speaking to actually died, because he did throw a bomb that went off. But then I don't recall if we saw him again in the episode. Yeah, I may have to rewatch that part. But anyway, we then finally see Cyril spot Cassian, and this was foreshadowed when they first just missed each other in passing earlier on in the episode. Cassian is about to shoot Dedra, but of course Syril stops him, and the two of them have a pretty intense and gruesome fight, you could say. The two of them are really going at it, and you could tell that although Syril is pissed at Dedra and probably hates her to a certain degree, he still loves her deep down, and he can't just sit back and watch her die, even though she honestly kind of deserves to at this point. I'm not gonna lie. For everything she's done, it would almost be like justice for her to die from the very conflict that she started in the first place. Eventually, Syril gets the upper hand after some struggle, and it looks as though he's about to kill Cassian. Cassian then asks him, "Who are you?" which is the title of the episode. But unfortunately, Syril gets shot in the head by the Gorman father. I'm not gonna lie, guys, this part really disappointed me and kind of shocked me. First of all, I did not see this coming at all. I definitely thought Dedra would be the one to die. I didn't expect Syril to die. But I'm also somewhat disappointed with this because it looked as though Syril was coming around. He was literally lowering his blaster. With everything he had just seen and been exposed to, there's a high chance that he may have come around and perhaps even joined the rebellion eventually. I just feel like there's so much they could have done with this character going forward, and not to say that the show didn't do a lot with this character already, but I really wanted to see him just join the rebellion, and I don't know, it just felt like his time was cut so short. But I guess this is a reminder as well that, like I said before, life is so temporary, especially during these times. Anybody can go at any moment, and it is tragic that he essentially died trying to save the woman he loves. That really made me sad, actually. I was, in a weird way, I was starting to like Syril, even though he's done and condoned horrible things, and I was really hoping that he would stick around. Cassian asking Syril who you are was such a weighted question as well, because Syril didn't even know how to answer that. Is he with the Empire? Is he with the rebellion? Is he somewhere in between? He looked as though he had really lost himself and had a complete rude awakening because of everything that had been going on. And so that just kind of makes his death more tragic, because he never got the chance to explore that, to explore potentially his new identity and what a new life for Syril would look like, potentially away from the Empire. We see another fight ensue not long after, this time between one of the droids and Cassian, and of course we see one of the Gorman fighters save Cassian in the scene, and I believe it's the same Gorman fighter that got Cinta killed in a prior episode. And so this, you could argue, is definitely his way of trying to make up for that tragic mistake that he made initially. And so you could argue that while he cost one life, which was Cinta's, he was able to save another life, which was Cassian's. So the way they were focusing on this droid in this scene definitely made me wonder whether or not they were going to save the droid's parts and try to reprogram it, and we later do find out that this is the case, and this droid becomes K2SO, which is the same droid that we see in Rogue One. At this point, so many protesters have been killed. The Empire has also suffered losses, so we essentially see everyone trying to escape now, and that includes Cassian. Cassian meets with Will and tries to get him to escape as well, but Will wants to go off and find his girl, Drina, who he has been cozying up to. This whole scene is emotional and feels like a farewell. Luckily, though, we find out later that Will didn't die, but he does get injured at some point, which we'll get into a bit later on. We find Drina giving an emergency broadcast that honestly gave me chills. Like, this was amazing. In this broadcast, she basically lets the truth be known, which is that the Gorman people were being massacred at the hands of the Empire, and she specifically says the conspiracy we feared is real. This was just such a chilling broadcast, guys. I can't put it in any other words than that. And you definitely get the feeling that this will be a tipping point against the Empire. We know that the Empire is obviously going to try to stifle any voices that speak the truth. And so the fact that Drina was able to give this broadcast, I don't even know if she realizes how significant that was, what she did. And we do in fact see the Empire try to cover this up, because after the whole incident, We see that the news reporters frame it as though the Empire stopped an insurrection and they lost some soldiers and martyrs and whatnot. And they also make it seem as though Gorman insurgents had help from the rebels. So they are trying to get people on their side into believing that the rebels are the enemy, which we know is obviously not the case. We also have a pretty intense scene with Dedra, and she looks pretty devastated. You could see that she almost looks as though she's struggling to breathe. She kind of does this thing where she adjusts her collar and she's shaking, visibly shaking, trying to adjust her uniform. And we've seen her adjust her uniform in the past, but obviously nothing like this, right? Now she's doing it in a very rapid way, in an uncomfortable way. You can tell that she's pretty much losing it. You're left to wonder what exactly is going through her mind. Is she acting this way because she's thinking of Gorman and how it's going to be another Ferrix, how people are getting killed, how it could look for her, or is she potentially wondering if Cyril is dead, which we of course know that he is at this point, but it's not clear if Dedra knows that he is. Overall, guys, I would say that this was just a fantastic episode. Wow, it just took my breath away. I actually wish I could have done a reaction to this one, I'm not gonna lie. Just so well done and very emotional, I would say. There were a couple times where I felt like I was choking up a little bit just because of what was going on with the protesters and also just how emotional the characters were getting too. You really just felt like it was such a hopeless situation. And just when you thought that couldn't be topped, well, we have episode 9, which maybe doesn't perhaps top episode 8, but we can say that it's a close contender. So this brings us into episode 9, guys. So the opening scene in episode 9 I thought was kind of striking, an upside down reflection of the Senate building in the rain, almost as if to say there's like a cloud looming over the Senate building, and also the Senate building's been turned like upside down, much different from how we once knew it. Everything has been now distorted and turned upside down because of the Empire. We see that the same senator who praised Mon in an earlier episode is being arrested over his support of the Gormans, and he tries to warn people about the truth. During this scene, Bale also warns Mon to be careful, as the Empire has been placing listening devices in more and more senators' offices. If the walls weren't closing in before, you really feel them starting to close in now, and you just see the lengths to which the Empire is going to suppress any talk about the Gorman massacre, or at least any talk that doesn't favor the Empire. We see Clea looks different this episode. Her hair is down, which is different from the familiar updo she normally wears. And to me, this is more than just a style change. I think it's symbolic. I think that when her hair is up, it's when she's kind of in spy mode, putting on a facade, not being her true self. I think when her hair is down, that's more meant to symbolize rebel Clea. And with Dedra, I find it's actually similar. We usually see her hair in a bun, and that's when she is in her Imperial uniform oftentimes, or when she's putting on some type of front. But when her hair is down, it's almost when Dedra's letting her guard down a bit, and that was usually around Cyril. Clea and Cassian have a conversation here. Cassian says that he is done. He doesn't want to do any more work for the rebellion. Clea pretty much reminds him of what's at stake and that he just witnessed the Gorman massacre. So if anything now, he should be just getting started. She reminds him of how valuable he is and how important the work is that he's doing. And they say an interesting line during this scene. Cassian says something about wanting to do what he wants to do, or having the freedom to do what he wants to do, and to which Clea replies, I thought that was what we're fighting for. So I thought that was kind of a deep line there. This show just proves time and time again how excellent the dialogue is. We see that Mon Mothma finds a listening device in her office, and instead of collecting it or storing it somewhere, she breaks it. And you're immediately left to wonder whether or not that's a mistake, because it does attract the Empire's attention. I think that kind of shows who Mon Mothma is, though. On one hand, she could have just taken the listening device and maybe put it in a drawer or something, somewhere far away where she's gonna speak so that it can't hear her. But instead of doing that, she just comes right up and breaks it and draws the Empire's attention. And so I think that kind of shows who Mon Mothma is, insofar as she's not necessarily someone that's going to play it more safe. She's someone to speak right out and address the issue head on, as we see her do towards the end of the episode. And so I think that that was kind of reflected in how she handled that listening device. We then see that Mon is practicing her speech, but she's in a public place away from her office, obviously, because she just found a listening device. And Luthen meets her. And it's interesting because when Luthen was walking to meet her, I found that in that shot, he almost looked a little bit like Vader from behind. And this is ironic because during this conversation, we have confirmation that he did in fact have Tay killed, and Mon Mothma actually says that she's more afraid of Luthen than anybody else because of how quickly he determined Tay to be a risk. And that's really telling, the way that they would kind of show Luthen as being this dark presence almost visually by making him look similar to Vader, and then Mon Mothma saying she's afraid of him. It's just a reminder again that Luthen, while being a part of the rebellion, he still does have questionable tendencies, and he is willing to go far in order to achieve that goal. Luthen essentially tells Mon Mothma that she has to be very careful who she should trust, that Bail Organa's team is compromised. He also tells her that her friend has been secretly spying on her or keeping watch over her for him. Obviously, Mon Mothma is not happy about this, and she later fires him. Luthen also reveals in that conversation that he is going to be sending someone that she needs to go with as soon as her speech is done, and we know from a prior conversation that this someone is Cassian. So now the speech is about to go down, and of course, yet again, we have some amazing tension build up here, guys. The Empire is trying to prevent certain senators from speaking, which is no surprise because the Gorman massacre just happened. We then see that Bail has a team of people that are supposed to quote unquote escort Mon Mothma away to safety following her speech. This is of course the same team that Luthen warns Mon Mothma about, and we later find out that he was right to do so because we find out that the woman is an Imperial spy and she kills the other man. And so this basically tells us that even though Luthen is questionable at times, he does seem to be truthful and he does seem to be reliable. I can tell you guys that during this episode, I have never been so on edge over a speech before, but oh my gosh, was there ever incredible tension building in this episode. We see that Bail eventually invokes a special order that lets Senator Mothma speak. And during this whole time, the Empire is scrambling to shut down the broadcast because they know what she has to say is in no way going to help them, and in fact it's going to harm the image that they are trying to portray. And so I loved every minute of this, them trying to shut it down and not being successful. Essentially until it was too late. Soon enough, we see all spotlight on Mon. If I didn't know at this point in time that she survived, I would be so afraid for her because at this point, obviously, she's playing with fire. She says a pretty thought-provoking speech, and one line she even says is that the death of truth is victory of evil. And that's a really telling line. That's exactly what the Empire relies on, suppressing the truth so that they can continue to rise in power and essentially do whatever they want. The highlight, absolute highlight of the speech though for me was when she called out Emperor Palpatine himself. Oh my gosh, I was losing it during this scene. That was incredible for her to do that. The balls on this woman, oh my goodness, the rebellion owes her so much. And it is at this moment, just after she called out Emperor Palpatine, they finally managed to cut the power. Just too late. You can see the camera cut to Bail and one of the other senators at this point, and I think we're led to believe that those two do agree with Mon, even though they can't publicly necessarily speak about it. Overall, this was just an epic part of the episode, seeing them scramble to try and silence Mon. And that one guy, he was literally losing his shit, guys. His eyes looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. It was the funniest thing in the world that they were unsuccessful in stopping her speech. I loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. And now, as predicted, the Empire is trying to detain Mon following that speech, and this is where Cassian meets her. She's of course hesitant to trust Cassian because who can blame her? There's literally spies and listening devices in every corner. But she soon learns that she can trust him as he says the familiar line to her, "I have friends everywhere." This is what Luthen told her to watch out for. And after some struggle, they're about to make their way out of the building, but then they are met with the same Imperial spy that killed the other member of Bail Organa's team. And this causes quite the confrontation in which they end up killing that lady and call her the rebel spy. So that was such a smart move because in that moment, that's the only way I think to get the crowd to kind of back down and not see Mon as the enemy necessarily. But anyways, yeah, I'm so happy that they're able to like take care of that lady and get Mon to safety. And I love how Mon Mothma is shocked because she's not used to the killing, and then Cassian says, "Welcome to the rebellion." Like, that's definitely quite the welcome party, Cassian. And this also happens to be the title of the episode. But it just shows how they have both been fighting the same fight for all this time, in the sense that they're on the same side, but they fight at the same time very different fights. Mon is on the political side, and Cassian is obviously on the actual fighting side, and so he's used to violence, whereas Mon Mothma is clearly not, as illustrated by that scene. But the killing doesn't stop there for Cassian, guys. He even kills her driver once finding out that he is an Imperial plant. But at this point, it's hard to blame them because they pretty much have to do what they have to do. The Empire is on their tail, everybody's a spy. And a little bit of a side note, I personally loved the shot of Bail in the Senate chamber, and the other pods in the background were slowly checking out. As their lights flickered out, it's almost as if to say the last bit of light has left the chamber, you know, like with Mon Mothma almost. Although we are led to believe that there is lingering hope with Bail and the other lady who likely agree with Mon Mothma but can't speak up about it. But I just thought that was kind of visually powerful and symbolic. One question I have though, I don't know if anybody else picked up on this either, but while Cassian and Mon Mothma were making their escape, did the Empire actually try to increase the speed of Mon Mothma's speeder in order to cause her to crash? Or was that just a seamless transition? Because it almost looked as though the one Imperial officer flicked a switch and the next scene was us seeing her speeder appearing to go faster. So I don't know if they had somehow bugged her speeder, just a thought I had. We then go to Yavin, and on Yavin we see Vel pick up a blaster. And as she was holding the blaster, I started to wonder if that was perhaps a blaster that belonged to Cinta. But I think we're led to believe that it's a similar, if not the same, blaster that Cinta used. And so perhaps Vel was thinking of Cinta in this moment, and that's perhaps why she wants to work with the man whom the blaster belongs to. After the big escape with Cassian and Mon Mothma, we then cut to the two of them as well as some of the crew, and it appears that they are on Coruscant, back in the same place that Cassian and Bix were living, or at least that was my interpretation of it. We then are taken into one of the rooms in which we see someone injured, and it turns out to be Will. At this point, we don't know quite how badly he's injured, but it is at least good to know that he is still alive, because last we saw him, he was going after Drina. He then goes to the Rebel base in order to get treatment. At this point, it is also revealed to us that the droid from the Gorman massacre was in fact patched up, and at the end of this episode we see that he is reprogrammed, and bam, K2SO is born, the same droid from Rogue One. We then are taken back to Cassian and Bix, and boy oh boy, what a scene this was, guys. We see that Cassian is telling Bix that he's done, that he pretty much just wants a quiet life with her, and she doesn't seem to necessarily be in disagreement, but she's not really saying much. And a couple thoughts did cross my mind. I didn't know why she was so silent. I don't know if maybe she was pregnant, or was she thinking about what the healer lady had said? Does she perhaps know what the healer lady saw? Does she know that Cassian is supposed to die, and that's what's making her feel conflicted? Or is she going to tell him that he has to fight, he can't quit? We then see that Cassian wakes up to an empty bed, and the question on my mind was, where is Bix? Where did she go? And as time went on, I started to wonder, did she leave? And we find out from a video she left him that she did in fact leave, and this was so sad. The two of them, you could tell, were very emotional. You could tell that Bix didn't want to leave, but she felt as though she had to, and now we know why she was so quiet during their conversation from the night before. If you think of Bix, everything she's gone through, she had been going through PTSD for so long. She finally got justice on her interrogator, was seeming to have a pretty decent life. We know that Vel met her and spoke to her about the rebellion and how Cassian is a leader now, and so it makes sense that maybe she feels as though she can't fully rest and be at peace until the rebellion wins against the Empire. She even tells Cassian that when it's over we can do everything we wanted, but of course we know that they will never get this chance because Cassian will die in Rogue One, which, oh my goodness, are the writers literally trying to pull out our heartstrings, guys? This was so sad. They may not even see each other again because we don't see Bix in Rogue One. So does she die, or is she just elsewhere? So many questions running through my mind during this scene. but I'm sort of getting the feeling that they may not see each other again. There is a part of me that wonders though, why maybe she couldn't communicate with him how she was feeling and try to join the rebellion together. Maybe he would have felt differently if he knew that she wanted to leave, right? Perhaps one of the reasons why he was done and ready to start a new life with her is because maybe that's what he thought she wanted. You can't help but feel and wonder if there's a little bit of miscommunication going on here. Is Bix inadvertently causing Cassian's death here? What would happen had she stayed and they just lived a quiet life? Maybe Cassian would be alive, but at the same time, maybe the Empire wouldn't have been defeated. If Bix hadn't left, would Cassian have eventually gone back to the rebellion? Definitely an emotional scene nonetheless, that raises a lot of questions and no doubt makes the events of Rogue One all the more emotional and all the more impactful. Anyways, guys, that does it for my episode 7 to 9 breakdown. Fantastic episodes. I'm just so impressed with this series. I am definitely eagerly awaiting the final 3 episodes to drop. I don't know how they can top what they've already done, but somehow I feel like they're going to find a way to do so. My prediction right now is that the final episode of Andor will coincide with the events of Rogue One somehow, or maybe it will end where Rogue One starts, or maybe the final scene of Andor will coincide with the end of Rogue One. So perhaps they might do some sort of final time jump, and then we will see the scene where Cassian and Jyn die. Something like that. Something similar to what the Clone Wars did with season 7 overlapping with Order 66. That's just my guess anyway. But yeah, guys, as always, you let me know down below in the comments what you thought of episodes 7 to 9 and what you're looking forward to from the final 3 episodes. And as always, guys, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Until next time, guys, take care and see you soon.